Welcome back to another episode of the BJJ Lab podcast. Today I'm here with Coach Joonas. And today we're going to talk a little bit about competition. So I think Joonas is a really good guest for this topic because he actually only started competing, I think, in the last year, right?
Yeah, last November.
And it's, I would say, a little bit unusual because he's quite advanced already and he didn't compete for a long time. So he has a unique experience there. So he already knows a lot of jiu-jitsu. He's really good at it, but he's still new to competitions. And he has done a few since, and hopefully we'll get some good input from him today. So the first thing I want to talk about is what actually made you do that. Or maybe we start from the other side. You didn't compete for a long time. Why? And then what made you actually do it for the first time?
All right. So I think I didn't start because I had some pretty serious confrontation issues. And then secondly, I always felt that the competition is related to higher rates of injury, and so it's not completely safe to do so, and so on. So probably these were my biggest worry points. Yeah.
And not completely untrue, if you look into that.
Yeah, sure. I think my data was from back home. We had a competition team in the old team where I was, and I remember these guys were really, really good, but they were always also constantly injured. So yeah, there's probably a bit of a trade-off there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's no way around that. And even if the injuries don't happen in competitions, I think you train a lot harder when you have something coming up, or the chance for injury just goes up because you roll a lot harder. And in competitions, you might do stupid things that you wouldn't do in training because you don't want to get scored on or submitted. That being said, from my experience, most injuries come either from takedowns when you don't know what you're doing, but that can happen in training too, as I just experienced recently. And I still count myself as not really knowing what I'm doing since we're mostly focused on the ground. It's not like we're doing judo or wrestling. Now, the more experience you have, of course, the injury risk, I think, will go down. It's just we might get a little bit of overconfident because we've been training so many years on the ground. We think we also know what we're doing standing, but it's a whole other game. But also there's more violent forces going on that could hurt you. And the other thing is if you don't want to tap. That's from most injuries I've seen would go either into the high impact velocity thing that can happen from a takedown or not tapping. And I think the takedown one can happen in training just as well. If you do, it's not that much related to competition, I think. Just people do maybe more stand up there.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot say, from my own personal experience, that the competition ever felt more dangerous than the normal training would.
But you pull guard.
Well, yeah, that is true. That is true. So, I definitely have my own a specific style of how I tend to go about things. But so it did not feel any more dangerous. And I also noticed that actually the amount of smaller or mini injuries, somehow straining a finger or a toe or something, would go up in the in the last months towards the competition. So yeah, so I think there are more injuries actually related to training
for the competition.
Yeah, for the
sure.
competition.
Yeah, that's definitely something I noticed as well. Especially the toes, the fingers, all the little things come from getting ready for the competition. Now, of course, it can happen in the tournament. It happened to me before. You try to get a grip and you jam your finger, but it's just as likely that it happens in training as well. So my worst injuries came always from the standing part before I turned into a complete guard puller. I feel since I've been pulling guard, my injury risk went a lot down in tournaments. And the other thing is tapping too late or people cranking submissions. It is a higher risk than in training, I think, for sure. Because even if you tap quickly, you can still get hurt, especially at brown belt. Happened to me in my first brown belt tournament when the guy cranked the toe hold. where I was actually tapping early, but he just kept cranking it. But there's a reason why those submissions are only from brown belt on, because at that time you're, I don't know, kind of prepared to deal with it, I think, a little bit more. At lower belts, the risk is relatively low since the submissions are somewhat safe. I had one injury on the elbow where I felt it for a month or so, but there was an armbar where I was not tapping in time, so that was completely on me. I think if you can keep your ego out, then it's a lot easier to not actually get hurt. And I think every time I got hurt from a submission, it was when I was up on points and the guy put a submission on me, and that's like those things where ego comes into play. You're winning, you don't want to lose, and you're like, if I survive this, I'm still winning. Yeah. But it's a bad idea.
I actually don't know how many submission losses I had. I think one, or so I don't actually have that much experience.
Yeah.
I lost through a bow and arrow choke in the Europeans, but
and that, I mean, chokes are not
exactly
that dangerous anyway. Yeah. But again, if you can keep your ego out, then like you're a lot less likely to get hurt for sure. It's when you get like really competitive, then it's when it happens. But also on some time, like I have to admit at some level, I'm willing to take some injuries, like in exchange for competing better. But I mean, that's a personal choice you have to make. And like in a toe hold, like you can, I mean, it sounds really horrible, especially if you're not a competitor. But a lot of competitors are willing to let their foot break to not lose the match. And you see it all the time in high-level BJJ, and the longer I train, the more I compete, the more I understand the mindset. But it's not smart. But if you really want to win and that's more important to you, like, I can see why. But then it's completely on you if you get hurt, like, can't blame anyone.
Yeah, definitely. Plus, the more experience you have, the more comfortable you get in those positions, and you actually get a better understanding of when those like footlocks and things get actually very dangerous.
For sure.
And when your ankle is going to bop. So.
And also how you have to deal off, like for me it's like on an armbar, I'm always going to tap, like no question. I don't want a broken elbow. I don't want a broken knee or a neck. Like there's some things where there's not a lot of give. But I'm like, I can still train after a toe hold even if my foot's swollen up. And it happened to me before. I've heard it actually a lot more in training than in competitions because it's just a dangerous submission. But that's one where I'm like the trade-off is different, but that's something that comes with experience, and I'll 100% admit that it's totally stupid, and you shouldn't do it, but if you're a competitor, that's something that's up to you.
And for context, you can probably watch the matches of Mikey Musumeci and Miao.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're actually holding on to, like, I think toe holds and like a straight foot lock for minutes and minutes in a row. And I'm quite certain they have pretty heavy bruises after that match. Yeah. But they're not willing to lose points. So that is a strategy.
All right. So what made you change your mind about competition? So we've talked a lot about the negatives right now, the injuries, the problems, but like what, like it sounds kind of like it's pretty stupid to compete if you think about it, like just from a rational point of view, but like what made you do it?
Yeah, it's definitely, from a rational point of view, if you want to stay super safe and healthy, then maybe not. But what made me do it? I think that the biggest motivator was that you were pushing me a lot. You started pushing me. So if that wasn't the case, I think I would have never competed at all. But I always try to sort of find like smaller sub goals in things that I do. So I try to sort of somehow, after I made the decision that I'm going to compete, I had to find those like my sub goals, and they were like sort of proving myself right, and the jiu-jitsu that I do that it works, because I'm teaching students, so I need to be absolutely certain that the techniques we do here would also work in a competition against a fully resisting partner. And I think thirdly or secondly, I was also really, really afraid of getting promoted before time. So I always had the feeling that I might get promoted out of nowhere, And if I kept on competing, then I could keep the belt and go on until the time is right.
All right. Do you regret the choice, or are you?
Oh no,
like to compete?
definitely not. Competing, no, not at all. I think it really proved some sort of some very essential points for me. I realized that I'm able to function under a much more under much more pressure than I would have expected to, and that I'm able to do things that are much harder than normal training or drilling or even like a competitive situation inside the gym. So
I think that's something that's really hard to describe if you haven't competed, right? Like this primal feeling, like when you're in a one-to-one combat with another person. That's something I mean, maybe if you start training for the first time, you get some adrenaline going, but in a competition, it's different because like you know that other person is there to win, and they'll do whatever it takes to do that, and they're willing to hurt you really bad to make that happen. Now you still have to referee, so it's not like a real self-defense situation. There's still rules, but for most people, the first time they compete, that's the first time they experience that kind of stress, that situation, and it's really unique. For sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think you have a point there. When we train and when we say that you go and train and you grapple and you go against people that are fully resisting you, then inside the gym between your friends and your training partners, it actually never goes there. So if you don't compete, you're actually also never experiencing what it means to go against somebody that is actually fully resisting what you're trying to do. So.
Yeah, and a good example might to come back to the letting things break. That's something like in training, people are not just gonna let their foot break, like they'll tap. But it's something completely different in a tournament where you like really have to go to the limit, and with some people you have to go over the limit, and that really forces you into a different mindset, and it really forces you to, like your technique has to be 100% on point. I've had submissions in tournaments where I'm 100% certain everyone in training would have tapped, but my opponent did not tap because it was not on 100%. And he was willing to maybe eat 1 or 2 pops to get out of it, which in training no one would do because it's stupid, but in a tournament it's different. So it gives you a different perspective on things for sure.
And I think it's very important to also to say that in training, your training partners are actually not willing to go that far. So if in a competition, if you don't tap on time, it's very likely you're going to break something or you're going to go to sleep. But breaking something in the gym inside a submission or going to sleep, it's I don't even know if I've ever seen that.
It might depend on the gym, but I think in our gym it's usually the.
So it's both ways, right? Yeah. So your technique has to be on point, and you have to realize that people are really willing to hurt you. So you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Now the competition is, of course, again, like a really emotional thing. Like there's a lot of those primal emotions going on, like the stress. And those really affect you, like before and during as well, of course. And so what was your experience? Like, how do you feel before your first time? Because you don't know what to expect, right? You have no idea what it's going to feel like. And you're in this... I mean, at least I was getting really nervous before my competition. How did you feel? Like, what was your experience?
Yeah, it was really nerve-wracking, and I can totally say that. I think I've never experienced that kind of an adrenaline rush, at least in a controlled situation. I mean, there has been definitely some more uncontrolled situations in my life where there's somebody was attacking me or something like this, where it could have been like similar. But under controlled circumstances, I have never felt this way. I was really scared.
So that's at the tournament or before?
That is at the tournament already. Yes, yeah. Like I was just envisioning the warm up area. So yeah.
Yeah.
Like I felt I had no strength in my body, and really I felt sort of like liquid almost inside my body.
Yeah. So yeah, this is also something that's of course hard to prepare for, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Did you have like a full-on adrenaline dump your first time, or were you able to manage it?
No, I didn't get the adrenaline dump, at least not the one that you had described before. And I think it actually never happened to me inside. Oh, maybe, sorry, still Munich,
Yeah.
the final. Yeah. There I
Yeah,
had it.
I mean, it happened to me many times, and it can still happen if you don't, like if I don't prepare well. So what we're talking about here is this, like an adrenaline dump when you're not really dealing, I would say, with the stress in the right way. So when you're in this fight or flight mode, you get this like adrenaline spike. And if the problem with this is like we're kind of from evolution or whatever, we're really used to either like you fight and you try to kill and finish the fight immediately, or you run away as fast as you can and get out of the danger. But in a tournament, it's going to go a little bit longer than that. And if you get that this primal adrenaline dump after 30 seconds, a minute of your body going into overdrive, you're dead. Like the one thing I always notice is the grips. Like your forearms burn so hard. Like I had this happen, especially the worst one I think was my first Europeans, where I was trying to hold the guy preventing from passing, and I was gripping so hard that after the match I could not close or open my hands. My fingers were just locked in place, and it was hurting so bad. I was just like basically cramped up like this. I had my stuff somewhere on my forearms, and I walked back to the stands where the team was, and then I was just sitting there for, it took me like an hour to get my feeling back and the pain to go away. That's something that, yeah, this is something you can't reproduce in training.
Yeah.
And it should not happen in tournaments if you prepare well. And now with the years, we've gotten better at like preparing and avoiding that. But if it happens, yeah, it's an interesting experience.
I mean, I really have to say, I think the preparation was on point, at least to the extent that something like this never happened. And I pretty much knew what was coming, let's say, technically knew. Of course, I wasn't ready for the feeling of adrenaline and, sort of, all the fear and all of that, and the emotional and the mental load. But we were, I think, physically very well prepared. Also, there were some techniques that you suggested me to look at, and things that I researched myself, and plus some other resources such as books and so on, to actually deal with the mental things as well. So I think on that side I was pretty well prepared. Yeah, and I actually remember in every competition, I remember the moment when I feel that my grips are getting weak, and then I let something go which I actually don't need. So like I was able to be mindful in every competition in Lausanne, in Munich, and also in the Europeans. There were moments when I was controlling my partner, for example, in the close guard. I realized I was ahead on points. There was another minute to go. I had to make it look that I'm being active, or I was trying to do something when my partner was strong. And then I realized I don't have to hold on to his collar or his lapel any longer. I have the overhook, so I just let it go and avoid burning out my ribs fully. So
that really helped the preparation, I guess. And of course, you were already really experienced when you started competing. I think if you've just been training for 6 months, it will be a lot harder, and chances probably that you will have a lot worse reaction, I would say. But it's also an interesting experience if that happens. Definitely valuable. How did you feel after? Like, there's this really big build-up, then there's the competitions, like the peak, you get the adrenaline going, the match, and then your last match is over. Like, how do you feel, and like, what did you experience?
So, I think the fact that at least that I felt that I did pretty well in the competitions, maybe changes my perspective on how I felt, or it would have felt differently if I would have lost in the first round immediately. But I felt like the achievement. I felt that I overcame myself and my fears and all the ideas I had about competition and so on. So I definitely felt much better, at least, or definitely after the first competition I had. Afterwards, I felt way better than I had ever felt before about my jiu-jitsu, even though I lost in the finals. So.
Well, you made it to the finals, which is
Yeah, it was one match, but still.
still, I mean, I would say most people probably lose the first match. Not everyone, but since chances are you're going to go against someone who has a little bit more experience. Not always, of course, but if it's your first time and it's not their first rodeo, chances are you might lose, even if you might be better in training, but just because you're not used to the experience of competing. But, yeah, so we've talked about that. So you said like you were pretty well prepared. Like, how did you deal with the stress? Like, what would you recommend someone who's getting ready for the first competition? Like, what should they do?
So I think a very important point is that when I started when I made the choice that now I'm going to go and compete, then that moment I actually determined that I need to have a sort of a strategy for that, right? And I need to have like a really good guard at least, because I'm not doing stand-up that much, I'm not wrestling that much, I also don't do that many throws. So I had to actually, build something up from pretty much zero, because we started drilling maybe 6 months before I went to the first competition, and maybe a couple of months before that competition I actually made the decision that I'm going to compete. So I think the first and the most important strategy that I had, or we had, was that I need a game. I need a game plan. There needs to be something ready for that competition. So that was the most important thing. And then after that, as we were building up towards the competition, we also started, with the conditioning. And I can definitely say that the moments when I was feeling really weak and really afraid in the warm-up area before the competition, I knew that I've never been like physically in a better shape than I was at that time. So that was also on the point. And then from the mental point of view, there was the visualization techniques, which I have to check them out again to tell you exactly what they were, but to paint a simple picture, it's about trying to visualize how it would feel in the competition, what the surroundings look like, how it sounds. For that, I actually a good recommendation from you. I was using earphones and an IBJJF competition background.
Actually, let's do a follow-up episode on exactly those kind of topics.
Okay.
So we'll skip over it right now, but then we'll go a lot more in depth. I think it's really valuable, but it deserves its own episode, I think.
All right, so I'll just name it. So visualization, trying to deal with the mental stuff, and then also like the book that you recommended me, I can recommend it to everybody as well. It's called How Bad Do You Want It by Mark Fitzgerald. I think everybody should read it, even if you're not competing. It's worth the effort, because it really helps you to set the goals and work towards them. Is there anything else?
So you already said you would definitely do it again. Would you recommend everyone to compete, or not everyone? Like, what would be your...
Oh, that's a good question. What I would recommend everyone to do is to at least, if you're a hobbyist, then I would recommend you to, for example, to look at some of the footage of the competition. Maybe look at the ones that Patrick already did with commentary, where you can actually see, where things are going and what the strategy is and how it looks like and how different it is from the training. There are some pretty good resources out there, like some podcasts with some really good grapplers that talk about their own experience. People from really high levels. Just listen to those people and think about try to figure it out, how it could feel, how different it is. And if it's worth the risk. And I mean, if you play it safe, if you tap early, you have a game plan, then I don't think you have that much to lose. But you have a lot to gain. You can overcome yourself. You can overcome the fears that you had, and also you get more comfortable in a situation which is really, really stressful. So yeah, I would recommend people to do it, but I would recommend people to do it, well prepared. Do not wait 5 years though, like I did. So.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be to do at least one for everyone, just so you know what it feels like. But I also would recommend you, don't say it's not for you until you've at least won something, whether it's a match or even a tournament. I think a match already will, like if you only lose, it like losing is not fun. No one likes losing. Even like if someone really, really is into competing, I can guarantee you they hate losing as much as everyone else. So like at least do one for the experience, but I also would be careful not to say like I really don't like this if you've only lost matches. Like give it some time, and if you've won one, then and you still don't like it, then I think it's totally fine if you stop. But I would recommend, I mean, it's an experience it's hard to find somewhere else, I think, and it's valuable for life, even if it's not for you, I think.
Yeah, and I also think it creates it creates sort of like another channel for you to actually to channel your competitiveness into something else, because if you don't have that, then it's very easy to be very competitive with your mates at training or your friends, your training partners, and that's maybe not the most healthy thing to do. So
that's true. Yeah. So you channel it more into the competition than
exactly,
in training.
and then you see that your roles within the gym are actually not that competitive. You're here to get better. You're here to to make friends, to have fun, and where you want to test yourself is on the tournament grounds.
That's a really good point. All right, I think we'll wrap it up here since we're running out of the limit on the camera, and we'll be back with another episode soon where we'll go a little bit more in depth. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.